The warm weather has officially arrived, so we need to get these squashes and zucchinis planted into the garden. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you 6 tips or learnings that I've learned from all of my experimentation with planting squashes and zucchinis for the last several years to get beautiful harvests. And the first learning is location matters. And with that in mind, welcome to Squash City. So squash absolutely love a full sun environment. And a few years ago, this front slope had nothing growing on it whatsoever. But I started experimenting with it and quickly discovered it is hands down my sunniest growing zone. As we can see, as soon as that sun, don't look straight into the sun, comes over the mountains there, this area really gets blasted with sun until it goes behind the mountains on the far side over there. So as a result, I converted this entire area into my squash growing zone, now known as Squash City. And then I built these really cool pockets into the slope that I'm able to plant the squash into so that they're able to absorb all of that sunlight throughout the day. But if I planted them just directly into the native soil, they'd really struggle. And that brings us to learning number 2, which is that squash love compost. And so when I was establishing each of these pockets, I filled all of them up with my favorite soil blend of 75% compost and 25% vermiculite. The compost ensures that the squash has tons and tons of nutrients so they can put on all of that big and beautiful foliage growth. And then the vermiculite is really incredible from a moisture retention perspective, which the squash also need to be developing the fruit. When we think about a squash, a watermelon, a cucumber, all in the cucurbit family, they're all pretty much like entirely water. Therefore, they need tons of water available in order to develop all of those fruits. So the vermiculite really helps with that. Now for this season, obviously all of this soil is now established. So all that I'm going to do is add 1 to 2 inches of fresh compost across each of them. And this is something that I do for all of my established growing areas, raised beds, before I plant anything into it. It's kind of my way of making a little investment into the soil bank account to ensure that there's new nutrition, new organic matter always going into my soil so that the plants that I'm planting into it have everything they need to thrive. Now that's a great start for our squashes, but take a look at the size of this squash seedling right now, and now take a look at how big it's going to get over the course of the summer. So there's no plant that really grows bigger and larger than squashes. And so learning number 3 is to transplant with worm castings and organic fertilizer. So all I'm going to do is dig a transplant hole that's about the depth of the seed cell, so about 4 inches. Then I'm simply going to grab about 1 handful of worm castings, pop that into the hole, as well as 1 tablespoon of 444 organic fertilizer. If you want to utilize either of these amendments in your garden, just head to the link down in the description of this video and I'll ship them off to you. I know that you're going to love them. After that, I'm just going to grab my seedling, pop it upside down, and then simply drop it into the seed cell right here. And then we'll just gently compact that so it's in there nice and snug. Now I will give it a nice big drink of water, but we'll do that just a little bit later towards the end of the video. And then I'm just going to repeat that process with the rest of my squashes and zucchinis. And one thing to quickly note on that front is that I'm gonna put my zucchinis towards the bottom and my squashes towards the top. And I'm gonna explain why in just a minute. Alrighty, so it might look like they've got a lot of space right now, but believe me, over the course of the next 60 days, this is absolutely going to fill in. And we wanna continue to help them in doing that. So the 5th tip or learning is to trellis your squash. And you might be wondering, Jordan, where's your trellis? I don't see any in here. And in past years, when I've been growing my squashes in raised beds, I've utilized a trellis that allows them to grow vertically. And I've actually got a whole video on that you can check out so you can build one out in your garden. But you might be wondering, well, what am I going to do in this instance? I don't have a trellis in place. And what I'm doing is actually utilizing the angle of the slope as a bit of a natural or built-in trellis. And this is why I planted my spaghetti squash and my delicata squash up at the top, because they're going to grow 8, 10, 12 feet long, and that will allow them to just kind of make their way down this slope. And then in the middle, I have my watermelons, and they're gonna grow 4, 6, 8 feet in length. so they don't need quite as much space. And down at the bottom here, I've got my zucchinis, and they don't really need a trellis. They're just gonna kind of bush out and fill out this area right here. So utilizing a trellis is going to allow you to absolutely maximize your space. Now we've only got 2 little tips left, and the 6th one here is a bit of a heartbreaker, and that is to remove the early flowers. Now ultimately it's from those flowers that the squashes, the zucchinis, the watermelons will grow and develop. So you might be wondering, why on earth would we remove those? And we want to do so because they take tons of energy away from the plant. And ultimately, we need our plant to be developing foliage at the beginning of the season, because it's these leaves that serve as effectively solar panels that allow them to absorb all of that energy from the sun that's now coming down, and then put that energy towards developing the fruit. So all that you need to do is trace the main stem until you find a flower, and then simply pinch it off with your fingers. And I continue to do this until the plant has at least 12 leaves on it. At that point, it's got a really healthy canopy to absorb energy from the sun, whereby it's able to both now develop fruit and put out more foliage. Now, if you don't trust me on this one and you can't bring yourself to removing the flowers, I encourage you to do it as an experiment. So find one of your plants and remove all the flowers on it and let them stay on the rest of your plants if that's what you'd prefer. And then as you go through the season, you'll be able to see how big of an impact it has. That experimental approach is a really, really great way to go about gardening, because it ensures that you're always getting learnings and growing as a gardener. Now, with that all being said, we are on to our final tip for today, and that is to water heavily. So as our squashes and zucchinis begin to develop those fruit, again, they are like 90+% water. So we need to ensure that our squashes have all the water they need to be doing so. And so I could not more strongly recommend utilizing a DIY automatic irrigation system for your squashes and zucchinis, because that allows you to really get a nice deep watering into them. What you can see for myself here is that I have feeder lines that run down to each of the pockets, and then at the very end I've attached a little bubbler or sprinkler. Now what most people do is they have these spraying several feet wide. However, what I recommend doing is run it at a really low pressure. That's going to ensure that all of the water is going directly into the root zone for our squash or zucchinis, giving them a really nice and deep watering. So I'm gonna set mine up and make sure they're running at a nice and low pressure. And while I do that, I wanted to introduce you to my online gardening mentorship, Grounded. Now, by virtue of you watching this video, I know that you want to become a competent and confident gardener. But that's a skill that takes time to develop, with lots of learning along the way. So as a mentee in Grounded, I'm going to guide you through the entirety of the gardening season. You're gonna be participating in live lessons to be growing your knowledge all through the season. You have live office hours each week where you're gonna be able to do question and answers with me live, as well as access to a private and closed community where we share both our highlights as well as our flops and fails. My promise to you is that as a mentee, you'll become a competent and confident gardener way faster than trying to figure it out on your own. So if that's of interest to you, I'd absolutely love to support you. Simply head to the link down in the description of this video to learn a little bit more. All right, there we have it. Water is running. These babies have everything they need to have an absolutely amazing season. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you've got any questions, leave those down in the comments. Otherwise, catch you on the next video.